In the dead of night, as Egypt slept beneath the shadow of tyranny, a woman sat silently, trembling, not from the cold, but from the storm inside her heart. In her arms, her newborn son. His breath was soft, his eyes not yet open to the world. But that world was not ready for him, for in this land, a mad king had declared war on innocence. Pharaoh, who called himself a god, had issued an unholy decree. Kill every male child born to the Israelites this year. Soldiers stormed homes. Screams filled the night. One by one, babies were torn from their mother's arms, and silence forever. But tonight, in a small, dim room tucked in the slums of Egypt, one mother, Yeheved, held her child for the last time. With tears streaking down her face, she whispered, "My Lord, you gave him to me, and now I give him back to you." She placed the baby in a tiny basket, lined with straw and wrapped in prayer. Then she let go. The current of the Nile took him. He floated silently into the unknown, carried not just by water, but by destiny. Yet the heavens were watching, and the voice of God had already whispered to her heart, "Suckle him, but when you fear for him, cast him into the river. Do not fear, do not grieve. We will return him to you and make him one of our messengers." Qur'an, Surah Al-Qasas 7. And so the river carried him onward, not away from danger, but toward the very palace of the tyrant who wanted him dead. The basket floated, drifting gently across the river, until it reached a place no one would ever expect. The palace of Pharaoh himself. The very man who had ordered this child's death would now become the one to feed and shelter him. It was Pharaoh's wife who found the basket first. Her heart softened. She looked into the baby's eyes, and in that moment, mercy overpowered power. "He will be the joy of my heart," she said. "A son to us both, do not kill him." And so, by divine irony, the boy who was meant to die in the river was now being raised in gold and silk, with soldiers at his door and servants at his feet. His name was Moses, or in the tongue of the ancients, Musa. He grew up inside stone walls filled with statues of false gods. Yet his heart belonged to something he couldn't name. He learned the ways of kings, how to walk like them, speak like them, but something never quite fit. He would look out the palace windows and see the Israelites, his people, being whipped, cursed, broken. And something inside him began to break too. One day he stepped out. No royal chariot, no guards, just a man walking among slaves, watching, listening, and then he saw it. A soldier beating an Israelite man, a cry for help, a blow too many, and Musa snapped. He rushed forward. There was shouting, dust, blood, and then silence. The Egyptian soldier was dead. Musa looked at his own hands. He hadn't meant to kill, but he did. Fear wrapped itself around his chest. He hid the body in the sand. But the wind of consequence cannot be buried. The next day, the truth spread like fire. Pharaoh wanted him dead. His own palace turned against him. Musa ran, not as a prince, not even as a hero, just a man, haunted by a death and hunted by a king. He disappeared into the wilderness. No home, no plan, no voice from heaven. Yet, days turned into weeks, weeks into years. Moses walked the desert as a fugitive, carrying guilt on his back and silence in his soul. He had fled Egypt, but he could not flee the questions. Who am I? Why was I spared? Why do I still feel watched? Far from Pharaoh's palaces, he became a shepherd in the land of Midian. He found peace, a wife, a life without thrones or blood. But deep down, he knew this was not the end of his story. And then one day, on a mountain called Sinai, something happened. He was following one of his sheep, just like any other day. But then, he saw fire, a bush engulfed in flames, yet it did not burn. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. He stepped closer, and then he heard it. "Moses, Moses," a voice from the fire, calling him by name. His heart froze. His knees weakened. "Take off your sandals." The voice said, "For you are standing on holy ground." This was no ordinary fire, no ordinary mountain. It was a meeting place between man and the divine. "I am your Lord. I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob." Moses fell to the ground. He could not speak, could not look. And then came the mission, the one he had run from all his life. "Go back to Egypt. Free my people from Pharaoh's grip." Moses trembled. "But I can't speak well. I'm just a man, they won't believe me." But the fire answered, "Who made your voice? Who gave human speech and sight and reason? I will be with you." Moses still hesitated. So God sent him a companion, his brother Aaron, to speak for him. And with that, a shepherd who once fled like a coward would now return as a messenger of God, with nothing but a staff in his hand and a fire in his soul. The prince had become a prophet, and the war between truth and tyranny was about to begin. Moses returned to Egypt, not as a prince, not as a fugitive, but as a messenger, with fire in his chest and God in his voice. He stood once more in the marble halls of Pharaoh, the same man who raised him, now his enemy. "Let my people go." Moses said. Pharaoh stared, unimpressed, amused. "Who is this God you speak of?" "I am God. There is no one above me." The court laughed, but Moses did not. He threw down his staff, and it turned into a living serpent. The room fell silent. Even Pharaoh's magicians tried to match it, but their tricks were swallowed by truth. Still, Pharaoh refused. So the warnings began. One by one, they came. First, the Nile turned to blood. Fish died. The river stank. Pharaoh's heart remained hard. Then came the frogs. They swarmed the streets, the palaces, the beds. No one could sleep. No one could breathe. Pharaoh begged for relief. But once the frogs were gone, he broke his promise. Next came the lice, then flies. Livestock died. Boils broke out. Hail rained like fire. Locusts devoured the land. Darkness covered Egypt for 3 days. Each plague, a message. Each message, ignored. Pharaoh's pride was a fortress, but it was beginning to crack. Then came the final warning. Moses looked Pharaoh in the eyes. "No fear, no rage, just sorrow. If you do not let them go, the firstborn in every Egyptian home will die. Even Pharaoh's own son would not be spared." But Pharaoh laughed again, and so the judgment came. At midnight, a scream tore through Egypt, not of war, but of grief. From the lowest hut to the highest throne, every firstborn son fell lifeless. Even Pharaoh's palace was not silent that night. And finally, Pharaoh broke. He summoned Moses in the dead of night. "Leave," he whispered. "Take your people. Go, before we all die." Moses turned, not in victory, but in mourning. He led the Israelites out of Egypt, millions strong, into the unknown. But Pharaoh's pride was not done yet, not entirely. The war was not over. The Red Sea was waiting. The Israelites marched through the desert with dust in their lungs and freedom in their hearts. After 400 years of slavery, they were finally free, but they had no weapons, no chariots, no land, just hope, and a prophet who once carried a staff instead of a sword. And behind them, Pharaoh changed his mind. "What have I done? They were our workers, our slaves. Bring them back." He sent 600 chariots, the greatest army on earth, thundering across the sands, like a storm of iron and rage. From the front, Moses saw the sea. From the back, he heard the sound of death approaching. His people cried out, "Why did you bring us here to die? Better to be slaves in Egypt than corpses in sand." Moses stood still, staff in hand, feet buried in doubt. But then the voice returned. "Lift your staff, Moses. Strike the sea, and watch what I do." So he did. and impossible happened. The sea began to shake. Wind roared from the heavens, and the waters split, not into puddles, not into streams, but into walls, towering walls of water left and right, with a path of dry land between. The people stared, and then they ran, mothers clutching children, old men carried on shoulders. Behind them, Pharaoh followed, charging into the path, blind with fury. But once every Israelite had crossed, Moses turned. He raised his staff one final time. The walls collapsed, the sea returned to itself, and Egypt's pride was swallowed whole. Chariots vanished, screams were muffled, and Pharaoh's army was no more. That day, on the shores of the Red Sea, the Israelites stood in silence, not in fear, not in anger, but in awe. A sea had obeyed a man, because that man obeyed God. Freedom was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The Israelites were no longer slaves, but they were not yet a nation. They wandered through the wilderness, hungry, thirsty, tested. Some cried for Egypt, some cursed Moses, some forgot the miracles, as if the sea had never split. But God had not brought them this far, just to leave them in the dust. He was leading them, not just to a land, but to a law. And so they arrived at Mount Sinai. The mountain trembled. Thunder cracked across the sky. A cloud of fire and smoke descended. The people backed away. But Moses climbed, step by step, higher into the fire. There, on the mountaintop, in a silence beyond sound, he stood before the Creator, and God spoke, not in riddles, not in wrath, but in command. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not kill. You shall not steal. Honor your mother and your father. Do not lie. Do not envy. Do not bow to idols. 10 laws, carved into stone, but meant for the heart. When Moses descended, his face was glowing, lit not by the sun, but by something far older. But below, he found chaos. In his absence, the people had melted their gold and shaped a calf with their own hands. They danced around it, sang to it, worshipped it. Moses dropped the stone tablets. They shattered on the ground, just like his heart. After all we've seen, this is what you become. He called them to repentance. He climbed again for forgiveness, not just for law. And once more, God answered. A new covenant was written, this time not just on stone, but in their story. The wilderness was not punishment. It was a furnace, refining a people into a nation. 40 years, they wandered, not because the desert was endless, but because their hearts were not yet ready. A journey that could have taken weeks became a lifetime. But through the heat and dust, Moses led them, guided them, carried their burdens like a father with restless children. He heard every complaint, answered every fear, watched a generation rise, and another pass away. He was a prophet, but he was also a man, and men grow tired. And so one morning, God told him to climb one last mountain, Mount Nebo. Alone, he made the climb. No staff, no crowd, no miracles. At the summit, the air was clear, the sky endless. And there, God showed him the promised land, green hills, rivers, a future that he would never touch, but had spent his life walking toward. God spoke, this is the land I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You may look, but you will not enter. And Moses didn't weep. He smiled, because it was never about him reaching the land. It was about making sure they did. There, on that lonely mountain, Moses closed his eyes and returned to the God who had once called him from fire. He left no palace, no statue, no pyramid, just a story, one that would echo through prophets, through generations, through time. A story of a man who once said, I can't speak, yet whose words shook empires. A man who once ran from justice, but became its voice. a man who parted seas, spoke to God, and walked until the very end for a people who often didn't understand him, but always needed him. This was Moses, servant of God, liberator of the enslaved, friend of the divine, and the man who showed us that even if we don't reach the destination, our journey still changes the world